Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'm sharing the cards I made using Paper Rose's Spring Rain 6x6 paper pad. There are 18 sheets of double-sided pattern papers, 3 each of 12 different designs. So I'm just going to show you these really quickly. So here are the first 6 designs, and some of the sheets have multiple patterns on one side, so that's really fun. Then I'll flip over the other side so you can see the other 6 designs. So lots of beautiful florals. There's some tone-on-tone designs. There's a sheet that has 4 different patterns. There's some lovely cut-apart wreaths, and then more florals with that white brick wall. It's a really beautiful collection. I will have links provided in the description box if you are interested in the paper collection or any of the products I use. For the first set of cards, I'm using the February 2021 sheet load of cards sketch by Call Me Crafty Al. I have several different pattern papers, the plaid paper, which is my favorite. I'm using that for the background. And I have the teal polka dot and some floral paper for this smaller rectangle piece. I'm going to layer this on some red cardstock. I did around the corner, the bottom, and the top corner. And I'm leaving about 1/4 of an inch for that matted layer. Then I'll adhere this piece onto the plaid paper. So even though some of these patterns are fairly busy, by having that thicker cardstock layer, it really breaks up those patterns. And I'll just layer that full panel on some teal cardstock. And this cardstock has a slight pearlescent finish, so it's really pretty. Put my card front onto a card base. For the sentiment, I'm using a cut apart by Paper Rose. This is their black and white sentiments. Thought this really bold sentiment would look nice. Using some more of that teal cardstock, I'm going to cut a fishtail on one side. And I am changing the sketch. On the sketch, it has this banner on the lower right-hand side, but instead I'm going to put it on the left-hand side between the 2 pattern papers. Just trying to make sure I get that banner nice and straight. Now before I adhere the sentiment, I'm going to add some of these blossom die cuts. And I use some specialty iridescent cardstock for them. So it has this beautiful green shiny finish. And this is from Tonic Studio. I believe it's the seafoam green color. I did trim the stem down just a little bit. Put some liquid adhesive on the back of the first stem. I do have to hold this in place just for a few seconds longer. Also decided to put my acrylic block on top just to make sure it's going to stay in place. So then I'll put some liquid adhesive on the back of the second stem. Just trying to figure out where I wanted it. And then I'll press that one in place, put my block again on top. And I decided I'm going to add a little bow to the stem. So I just have some orange and white twine. I'm going to tie a very small bow. Once I'm happy with the size of the loops, I'll just trim off the tails. So I think those die cuts should be adhered in place. Now before I do attach that sentiment, I'm going to add some scrap pieces of cardstock in the upper right-hand corner. Just trying to keep everything at the same level. I'll put liquid adhesive on the back and adhere it in place. And then for the little bow, I'm going to add a mini glue dot just to the back behind the knot. And then I'll attach it to the stems. And there is my finished card, and I did end up making 2 using this sketch. I absolutely love these 3 pattern papers mixed together. So pretty. Moving on to card design number 2, I have a piece of pattern paper that I cut in half. So this piece is 3 inches, and then I did trim down the sides, so it's 5 1/4 inches. Now it's not big enough for a panel on an A2 size card, so I cut a thin strip of that white brick pattern paper. That way I can extend it, and I am going to cover up the gap between those 2, so no one's going to know I didn't have a full piece for that panel. I decided to add a little bit of sparkle to the bottom of the card, So using that same green iridescent cardstock, I cut a very thin strip and I'm just gluing it to the very bottom of this dark blue cardstock. And then I'll attach this piece right on top. So I'm gonna have all the flowers growing up, kind of like they're bushes against the wall. Now to cover up that gap between the two pieces, I also did not get those two pieces very straight. I have some more of that green iridescent cardstock. I use a scallop die. Then I attached a thin strip of that blue cardstock on top. And I'll just glue that over the gap, and now you can't tell that there's two pieces in the background. I'm going to put my card front onto a card base. And as pretty as that iridescent cardstock is, I still like to use very small amounts. It can be overpowering. I selected another sentiment cut apart. This is a little something to make you smile. I cut a fishtail on the right hand side, put some liquid adhesive on the back, and I'm just gluing that onto the blue strip. I decided to add another twine bow, this time in blue and white. Trying to get those loops at the same size, and I can trim off the extra tails. I'll use another small glue dot and attach it to the left of the sentiment. So overall, this is a very simple card, so I thought it needed a little something extra. I took another sheet of the pattern paper, since you do get 3 of each design, and I fussy cut out all of the flowers. I put some thin foam squares on the back. Then I'll adhere them directly onto the same flowers so it looks like decoupage. And I'll add that little extra dimension. I know you can't really see it on the video, but the card recipient will notice. I just have the 2 small flowers left. And then one final flower there on the left-hand side. Then I'm also gonna bring in some of Paper Rose's Clear Crystal Shaker Mix. I love to use these as bling. Never actually put it inside a shaker card yet. Maybe I should do that next video. So I'm going to put a couple of them in the upper right hand corner underneath the sentiment, and then I'll sprinkle a few around the flowers. I like to lay them out on my card first, then I'll grab my embellishment wand to help pick them up, add a drop of Barely Art glue to adhere them in place. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. It was so easy to make 2 similar cards using that one 6x6 sheet of paper, since I cut it in half and had the 2 3-inch pieces. So moving on to card design number 3. This is a card sketch from Mojo Monday. It's number 552. I have several different pattern papers. I have this pink stripe paper for the background. And have a strip of this really pretty floral paper for the left-hand side. Using some more of that teal polka dot paper, I layered that on the teal cardstock. And for that thin strip, I'm just using some more of this reddish cardstock. I will add a scrap piece of cardstock to the right-hand side before adhering it in place. And I'll put this panel on the scalloped rectangle die cut. I'll put my card front onto a card base, leaving some of the white card base showing. I'll have that little extra pop of white. I used one of the wreath cut aparts, and I just fussy cut all around the outside. I'm going to put a small piece of cardstock on the left-hand side, and then I'm going to pop up the whole wreath. And I only added that cardstock just to make sure it was all level. Remove the release paper on the thin foam squares and then adhere it to the card. And I'm not following this sketch exactly. I'm not going to have that banner coming out toward the right. I'm using one of the sentiment die cut and also a cut apart. So this will be "Hello, you make me smile." I'll put some foam squares just on the right side of the sentiment cut apart, trying to keep it at the same level as that wreath cut apart. And then for the hello word, I'll just add some liquid adhesive. Now I'm going to use my tweezers to hold it. It's much easier to add the liquid adhesive on the back side. I'll attach that right above that sentiment. Then for some finishing touches, I'm going to pull out the clear crystal mix again. You're going to see me use this mix a lot. There's a ton in this package, and there's 4 different sizes, so I really like the variety. I'm going to put 2 in the upper right-hand corner, 2 in the lower left-hand corner, and then 1 above the sentiment. And I wanted to make the word hello pop just a little more, so I'm going to cover it with some glossy accents. Just trying to make sure to get good coverage and not have any bubbles. And I did speed this portion up quite a bit. So now it has a super shine to it. So there is the finished card, and I was able to make 2 using this sketch. Now moving on to card design number 4. Using another card sketch from Mojo Monday, this is number 543. And if you are interested in any of the sketches I share, I have all of that information on my coordinating blog post. The link is provided in the description box, or you can simply head over to KristieMarcotte.com. For the background of the card, I have 2 pattern papers, 1 strip of the floral paper, and then the other side is this blue watercolor distress paper. Layered that with some dark blue cardstock. Put my card front onto a card base, leaving that 1/8 of an inch of the card base showing. Now for the strip that goes across the card, it's this red paper with some white diagonal stripes. I didn't have a long enough piece, so this is not 4 inches wide. It was actually only 3 inches. It was one of the pattern papers that has the 4 different designs. So no problem, I'm still able to use it. I cut about 3/4, or maybe 7/8 of an inch off of the side, and then I layered it on the red cardstock. And since I'm going to cover up that gap, I'm not going to know that I didn't have a full piece. So I used another of the wreath cut aparts, this time used a circle die, layered it with a dark blue circle die cut, and then once I attach that, now you can see that gap from the red pattern paper is completely covered up. For the sentiment, I used a thank you die set, and it's very delicate, so I'm trying to be careful. Put some liquid adhesive on the back, trying to make sure to get it straight. For dies that are really thin like this, it does help to use thicker paper to cut them out. So if I'd use some thin paper like copy paper, it'd be harder to get it adhered nice and straight. For some finishing touches, I'm going to add a couple banners to the upper left-hand corner, one using the red cardstock and the other some blue. I put that scrap piece of cardstock to the right of that red banner just to make sure the blue banner was nice and level. And then I'll add a few of the crystals, put 2 of them on that banner, and then I'll put a few of them around the sentiment on the wreath. So now that I have them in place, I can pick them up with my embellishment wand, add that drop of glue, and adhere them in place. So there is my finished card, and I was able to make 3 using this sketch. Whenever I do my paper pad videos, I really try to use a little bit of every pattern paper that's in the paper pad. Now moving on to card design number 5. I use Paper Rose's comic strip frame die. This is a really fun die. It's great for using up those small scraps. But for this card, I actually had 2 full sheets. I'm just going to do 2 different patterns. I flip over the frame and I put some double stick tape on the back. My 1-inch roll ran out, so I did have some 2-inch tape on hand, so I decided to use that. So then I flip the frame over, and then I just inlay all of the pieces like a puzzle. I'm trying to mix up the patterns, but when you only have 2 different pattern papers, there will be some of the same patterns next to each other. So I'll get that last piece in place, give it a good rub, and I did have a little bit of that double stick tape off of the end of the frame. So I'm just going to remove the backing on the tape and attach it to my card base. Now this frame is a little bit smaller than an A2 size. It's about 1/8 of an inch shorter. So I did cut my card base down. For the sentiment, I'm going to use this large hello die. It includes the outline, so it'll really pop. Put some liquid adhesive on the back and then attach it to that outline die cut. Trying to use colors that match with that plaid paper. Hello is always one of my favorite sentiments since you can use it for any occasion. Now I did make this one a birthday card. Decided to add one of the cut-aparts underneath the sentiment. And then I'm also going to use this fun branch. Did 2 of them using that green iridescent cardstock. And it does have the little leaf pieces you could pop out, but I decided to leave them in. I'm going to adhere the first one down directly onto the card. And for the second branch piece, I did put some foam squares on the back of just the leaves. I'll add some liquid adhesive to that lower branch. Trying to figure out placement for that. And on the back of the hello die cut, I also put some of the thin foam squares. Although on the very end of the H, I put a small piece of scrap cardstock since it's going on top of those leaf branches. Put some liquid adhesive on the sentiment and then tuck it underneath the word hello. So finishing touch, bringing out the clear crystals again. Put a couple of them around the leaves and then a few on the right-hand side of the sentiment. Now on the other card I did similar, so I had an opposite card where the plaid paper is. I have the polka dots. I did end up having the sentiment and the little branches slightly higher, and I think I prefer that. Not sure why I did it lower this time. But there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using the same design. Now moving on to card design number 6. I'm using the March 2020 sheet load of cards by Call Me Crafty Al. I have 3 different pattern papers and I'll be layering most of it on that teal cardstock. So I have some raindrop paper in this light green and then some more of the teal polka dot paper. And there will be that little gap between the 2 patterns, and I am going to fill that in with some scrap cardstock. For the strip that goes diagonal across the card, I did layer it on some silver mirror cardstock. So I'm going to use some liquid adhesive for this piece, and I'll adhere it at an angle as indicated on the card sketch. Put some adhesive on the back of this panel. And you can see I have the pearlescent paper on the back side this time. And that's only because there's a little more contrast between the back side of that cardstock and the teal polka dot paper than that pearlescent finish. So after I adhere that, I just flipped the whole card over and trimmed off the extra of that gray paper. For the sentiment, I'm using another cut apart by Paper Rose. I'm going to layer it on some cardstock. And I didn't get it straight at first, so I'm going to try that again. Since I did have to remove this sentiment off the cardstock once, I decided to use some liquid adhesive just to make sure it's going to stay in place. So I'll add some more liquid adhesive and tuck it just a little bit underneath that diagonal pattern paper strip. I wanted to add something to the left-hand side. It seemed a little empty. So I'm using those blossom branches again. I think that's what it's called, the blossom. This time I used some blue iridescent cardstock, and I'm not sure where I got this one. It was some scraps that I had on hand. I'll use 2 of them again. Attach the first one. And I would pop this one up, but it's fairly thin, so I'd have to cut some super tiny pieces. So instead, I'm just going to glue it on top. Put some liquid adhesive on the back, and then adhere it slightly lower than that first set of branches. I'll put my acrylic block on top to help everything stay in place. And then finish off the card, add some more of the clear crystals. I'll put 2 of them in the upper right hand corner, 2 in the lower left hand corner, and then just 1 more by the branches. I like to do my bling in odd numbers since it's supposed to be more pleasing to the eye. So there is my finished card, and I was able to make a total of 4. I did change up the pattern paper and also used different sentiments for each card. When I started this set of cards, I didn't have any full 6x6 sheets left over. It was just scraps. So now moving on to card design number 7. So at this point, I really don't have a lot of pattern paper left over. I'm using some white shimmer paper for the background, and I'll layer that on some dark blue cardstock. I'll put my card front onto a card base. And for the 3 pattern papers, I used the Paper Rose banner die set. Cut 3 different sizes. So I have the largest one on the left. I use a medium size for that floral paper. And for that thin blue banner that's on the right, the die isn't actually that long, and I also didn't have a very long piece of blue paper. So I cut it out twice, and I'm going to cover up the gap between the 2 pieces with that red cardstock. I'll use some liquid adhesive to attach all of the banner die cuts. I'm going to have the floral one on top, so I'll attach the blue banner behind it. Trying to line it up and make it look fairly straight. It's not going to be perfect since there is going to be that gap between the 2 pieces. Put some liquid adhesive on the back of the floral piece and then adhere it to the card. And then before I attach that red cardstock strip across the card, I am going to add some scrap pieces just to level it out. I'll first put a small piece in that gap between the blue banner die cut pieces. And then I'll add a piece to the right and left of that floral banner die cut. Just use some liquid adhesive to attach them to the back side. Try to hold up the cardstock so I have the right size piece. I'll put liquid adhesive on the back of this strip and then adhere it to the card. So now it looks like that blue banner on the right hand side was a long die piece, but it really isn't. I cut out 2 pieces using Paper Rose's Nesting Label 1 die set. So 1 in that dark blue cardstock, and then the smaller piece used some white cardstock. Just adhere that right over the center of the floral banner. I'm going to use the sentiment hello, use the same red cardstock as that strip in the background. I'll just adhere it in place using some liquid adhesive. I was trying to get it nice and straight. Wanted to move on me at first. And then finishing touches, I'm going to add a double bow to the left of the sentiment. Use some glue dots on the back side. I used a few glue dots this time since it is a larger bow. I'll bring out the clear crystals, put 2 of them in the upper right hand corner and then just 1 to the left of that sentiment. Add my liquid adhesive, and this card is all finished. And I was only able to make 1 since at this point I only have very small paper scraps left over. So moving on to card design number 8, and this is the final card design. I used Paper Rose's embossing folder. This is their hand stitching 1 folder. I have some white shimmer paper. And what's really fun about this embossing folder is you could use it either direction. I mean, you can with all of them, but this has more of a stitched look instead of just the little bumps from an embossing folder. So I decided to have it bumps in, I guess, instead of the little bumps up. I'm sure there's a technical term, but I'm not sure what it is. So I'm saying bumps in. I'm I'm going to layer this on some of the teal cardstock and then again on some black cardstock. It'll give it some really good contrast. Since I only have very small pieces of pattern paper left over, I decided to use a Hello die and cut out 5 of them using 5 different pattern papers. So I have another strip of the white shimmer paper and I'm going to adhere all of the Hello die cuts on this strip. And I did speed this portion up quite a bit, just trying to make sure to get them fairly straight. I'm rotating the colors so there's a nice balance. And I didn't measure these out, I'm really just eyeballing the placement. So after I attach the final Hello, there was a little too much white on the top and I wanted it to be even with the bottom. So I'm just gonna take that and trim it down and then I'll adhere it to that black cardstock. Then I decided I'm gonna pop up this panel. So I'm using some foam dimensional tape and just covering it on the back of this piece. Trying to get good coverage so there isn't one area that sags at all. Remove the release paper and adhere it to the center of the card. And then finishing touch, I'm going to add 2 small banners to the left side. So I have one with the teal cardstock and I'm just going to tuck it in underneath the edge of that black cardstock. It was a little too long, so I did have to trim that down. And then I'll do the same with that black banner. And I forgot to add the little piece of cardstock to balance out that black banner, so I'm going to do that now. Luckily the glue hasn't dried completely yet, so it's easy to just pop that underneath. And I didn't add any bling. I felt this was enough and I really like the look with all those different pattern papers. So there is the finished card and I was able to make 2 using this same design. Here are all the leftover pattern paper scraps and I also had a few more of the Hello die cuts left. I'll be adding those to my scrap box of the year and at the very end of the year I'm going to attempt to make a few more cards. In addition to the paper pad, I also used 3 sheets of 8.5 by 11 and 5 sheets of 12 by 12 solid colored cardstock. I ended up making 18 cards using Paper Rose's Spring Rain 6 by 6 paper pad. I thought it was really fun how I have 18 cards and there's 18 sheets of paper in the collection. I have provided links in the description box if you are interested in the paper collection or any of the products I used. Paper Rose is located in Australia and they do ship internationally, but you can also buy their products in the US, and I will have links to both places in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.